Voters in Ottawa will choose their next municipal government on Monday. Who are some of the new faces on City Council going to be? What kind of mandate will the next Mayor of Ottawa receive? What will be on voters' minds when they go to the polls? We're going to talk about all of that and more. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Sutcliffe, and I'm joined by several people who are going to be commenting on the municipal election and have been following it closely. Former Ottawa City Councillor Steve Desroches is with us. Jonathan McLeod, who writes a weekly column in the Ottawa Sun and is a frequent commentator on municipal issues. And joining us on the line is former Ottawa Sun columnist Susan Sherring, who ran for municipal council 4 years ago. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Sue, are you feeling like you miss the experience of being on the campaign trail this time around?
I'm not wishing I was there. I've said many times that, it was a fabulous experience. I, in hindsight, underestimated the importance of starting earlier. And, I think I'm only doing it once. I wish I'd done it a little bit better. Win or lose, there were things I could have done, but anyone who has an interest in municipal politics, like a deep interest in municipal politics and volunteers in their community, it's certainly something I would encourage people to do.
Yeah, and more than 100 people are doing it right now, running for city council or for mayor, including some very interesting races. There are 4 races where the incumbent is not seeking re-election, so we're going to talk about those in a few minutes. But let's start by talking generally about how this campaign has gone, to what extent it's captured the attention and interest of the community, and what the key issues are. Jonathan, what are your overall thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's caught people's attention in certain wards for certain races. The mayor's race has not garnered as much attention as we want, maybe more than 4 years ago, but that's not a high bar to clear. But certain races, I think there's actually a lot of excitement in College Ward, even if no one expects Rick Shirley to lose. Alta Vista, there's a lot going on. Capital Ward, where I am, is very animated. Gloucester South Nepean, with Carolyn Meehan coming in, that even though there are other strong candidates there, her profile really elevated that debate. And then, there's also Orleans, where there are 17 people registered, 15 people actively running, and I think people are trying to get a hold of that, but I don't know how they're doing. In terms of what people are talking about, we're hearing a lot about roads, a lot about streets, making sure that they're safe, making sure that we fill potholes. That's coming up in just about every debate there is across the ward. People are talking about development issues. They're different across the ward, but there's a lot of commonalities about making sure that there's sort of right-sized development for each community and for each ward, and making sure that the services and the infrastructure are there to support the communities. And an interesting thing I'm seeing, and I might have my own sort of specific bent on these issues, is that I'm seeing sort of a latent urbanism spreading throughout the city. I'm seeing people in West Carleton March and out in Orleans and out in Barrhaven. They're talking about wanting complete communities. They're talking about wanting to move away from this sort of bedroom community idea. They want the economic hubs, and they want livability. And there's a lot more talk of like rejuvenating St. Joseph Boulevard in Orleans and making it more walkable and bikeable. So it's not about. I'm not saying that anybody wants to turn Orleans into Centertown, but just sort of some of those aspects of sort of the livable city are spreading beyond, and there are candidates trying to find ways to sort of adapt it to their specific communities.
Okay. Sue, what's your sense of this campaign? What do you think the core issues have been, and are people paying close attention to it?
I think for people like Jonathan and I, that's probably a hard question to answer.
Right. Because you are paying attention, obviously.
Well, yeah. Exactly. And I mean, until I got into doing all the research, as I've said on Twitter, I broke my wrist, so I haven't been able to go anywhere and to see firsthand watching the debates. And thanks again to Rogers for providing all of those. But I was finding it a relatively lackluster campaign. But once you get into it, there are so many fascinating races. I mean, as you said, you've got the 4 without an incumbent, but again, some of those that Jonathan mentioned, even in Barhaven, I've been pretty surprised to see. I haven't talked to her, but I mean, there was a period of time where it appeared Jen Harder was really worried about winning or losing, which, you know, I think for many of us just sort of assumed it would be a cakewalk. But there are a whole bunch of new candidates there, and some of them started earlier. Some of, at least one or two of them went into the Stonebridge community, and you'll probably recall that whole debate about the future of Stonebridge, and residents there were really upset. So some of the new candidates got, you know, residents riled up, and she was, you know, really upset. Not upset that people were out there, but I think she realized, you know, she had to remember this was actually a campaign. I don't mean that in a derogatory way to her, but, you know, Barhaven has really been her entity for a long time. But all across the city, you know, you hear about close debates, you know. I presume Scott Moffat's in good shape, but, you know, he does have someone who used to work for him taking him on. So in that case, at least that guy, Glenn Brown, really knows. It is Glenn Brown, isn't it?
David Brown, I think, yeah.
Dave Brown, he knows the issues. So, you know, you've got all across the city some debates that if people want to pay attention, they can really see what's going on.
Yeah. All right, Steve, what's your sense? And maybe we can look at some of the issues where we're not sure if it'll affect the outcome or not, but we know that there were some big issues around things like the Salvation Army shelter on Montreal Road, the development in the Alta Vista ward, that some people were very upset about, having people displaced for new development there. So there were some campaigns where there were some hot button issues, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of races that have ward issues that are very specific to those wards. And as much as the Salvation Army is a citywide issue, probably is going to have its biggest impact locally on that ward.
Yeah.
I think people are,
yeah,
in Rideau Vanier. I think people are obviously starting to pay much more attention now as they head into the polls and get ready for the advance. That's typical, I think, of any election. It's tough knocking on doors in the summer, having done it, and talking about a municipal election when that's not top of mind to people. We also had a provincial election that I think really sidelined the municipal election, and people got into full swing after the dust settled with the provincial election. No, I agree with Jonathan. I think our city, it's a big city, and we have big city issues, and we've got people who've lived here a long time that aren't used to seeing some of the things we're seeing in terms of growth, in terms of crime, and these are often not issues that can be solved with an easy solution or just by one level of government. But I think there is concerns about how you manage growth, not just in the downtown core, but in the suburban communities, how we move people from one end to the other through transportation. And we've seen the shootings and crime that I think has people worried, and they wanted candidates to speak with concrete ideas in terms of how they're going to address it, and not just platitude. I've always said this is one of the smartest cities, I think per capita, the highest number of PhDs, highly educated. So I think a good candidate should have some good concrete proposals to put to the public, because I think they're going to test them for sure on Monday.
Now, the provincial election that you mentioned, by the way, I know some municipal candidates, they would go knocking on doors and people would say, I thought the election already happened, because people get different levels mixed up. But the provincial campaign was clearly a choice between several different directions the province could go. And in particular, once I think people concluded that the Liberals weren't going to be re-elected, it was a choice between two different directions. The Progressive Conservatives under Doug Ford, or the NDP under Andrea Horwath. Is there that kind of choice at stake about the future of Ottawa right now in this election? Is there a choice between directions, or are we sort of destined to go in one direction, and this is more just about who's going to represent you and who's going to be there to make some of those decisions at a local level? What do you think, Jonathan?
There are definitely some issues with direction. I think in terms of the direction, you're going to see a lot of what we've seen for the past 4 years, where Jim Watson is still going to be there, we all assume, setting the course, setting the agenda. I think there'll probably be a little more pushback from councillors this time around. So we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going, with LRT. We're going to keep going with trying to find this balance between not raising taxes too much, but also being able to actually pay for services and infrastructure. And you're going to see a lot of sort of push-pull between councillors. But within the wards, there's often a lot of overlap between the candidates. I look at something like Alta Vista, where there are 3 challengers against incumbents Jean Cloutier, Kevin Kitt, Clinton Cowan, and Raylene Lang-Dion. And there are some differences, but there's a lot of overlap. And when you go to a ward, there are certain issues, and everybody who's done their homework, who's running, they know those issues, and a lot of the answers are kind of the same. You know, we brought up Stonebridge in the golf course. So in 2 of the debates, 2 of the Rogers debates, that came up.
And thank you, by the way, for watching all of them, Jonathan.
I still have to do the little mayoral thing,
Okay.
but I've watched all of the wards. I finished that last night.
Yeah. You should receive
I feel
some
like I
kind
spent my day with you today, Mark.
Okay, well, that's nice. Yeah, you know, you should receive some sort of medal or something for that.
You're right. I probably should.
Yeah.
Any candidates who want to put that in their platform now can go right ahead. Yeah, but so there's a lot of overlap in the wards, within a ward. So you're often finding tinkering around the edges, seeing just who has the slightly better ideas for traffic and for environmental concerns and for policing and for budgeting. So it's within your ward, you're not seeing massive clashes. Well, occasionally, but not really too much. There's a lot of overlap.
Sue, what do you think? Is this a competition of ideas and philosophies, or is it more about who do you want representing you when decisions need to be made over the next 4 years?
I think, you know, obviously I'm not telling you guys anything new. It's very, very hard to unseat an incumbent. And unless there is a big issue, you know, you don't really have anything to hang your hat on. I get very weary, and not just because I ran, I think more because I've covered City Hall for so long. These people who just talk about change and you need to be a better representative. If someone new is coming in, I want concrete examples of what you're going to do differently. And I often don't see that in some of these debates. And so, of course, when you see a good challenger coming on, you're like really struck by you know, I remember interviewing, the first time I ever interviewed Scott Moffat was 12 years ago when he took on Glenn Brooks for the first time. And I just remember being shocked at how confident he was, the number of ideas he had. Now, I mean, he lost. He didn't beat Brooks that time. But I believe, as much as I try and pay attention to everyone, it's very hard to come across as a solid challenger when you're facing an incumbent, because you have to be able to prove to everyone you're going to do a better job. So I think that's a really hard thing to do.
All right. There are at least 4 new faces that will be on City Council after the election, because there are 4 wards where the incumbent is not running again. Maybe there will be some upsets in some other wards as well. But as Sue pointed out, it is difficult in a municipal election to unseat an incumbent. We're going to talk about those 4 wards where there will be a new face and some of the potential areas where there might be upsets, and we'll handicap the mayor's race as well and talk about what some of the key issues have been as Jim Watson seeks re-election for a 3rd term as mayor of Ottawa. All of that and more coming up on the local campaign. We'll be right back.